The way that films, books, or TV shows get across their setting is not of this world is pretty clear. They'll tell you. If for some reason they don't, then we probably get a big hint from some visuals, like the fact that there are blue people, or giant sandworms, or Pokemon, I guess. But how does an album get across a similar feel, as if the sounds we're hearing came from somewhere else? Besides Pokemon again, I already checked that. With a medium that's almost entirely auditory, vocals are the only instrument that can be used to directly present information to us. And they're often vague and indirect anyways in music, rarely saying flat out, well, that last song was about the planet of bird people called Roxworthford in the year 2275, and this next one we got here takes place in Colorado. There were always a few records that I imagined in my mind not taking place here. They just didn't sound like they belonged, but without a single, more objective aspect to point to as quote-unquote evidence the way that visuals or exposition in a film would apply. An album probably has to be a collage of aspects to reach a similar otherworldly vibe, and as I looked at the albums that already fit that to me and tried to find others that could, I wanted to sort out those aspects more clearly. Though I'll say first that when I'm talking about bands and albums from other worlds, I don't necessarily mean just another planet, or to be very sci-fi and alien in that way. Sure, there are cases like that. I mean, David Bowie would probably be the first artist to come to mind on this topic for most people, since he has such larger-than-life personas like Ziggy Stardust, who just is an alien, and sometimes very directly sets up where we are with his lyrics on stuff like The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and The Spiders from Mars, which, yeah, I wonder if aspects of that album relate to things outside of our Earth. Gee. But to jump back to films, there are some that qualify in a way different from the initial examples, such as Sorry to Bother You or Phantom of the Paradise, where a lot of the world is similar to ours, but the piling up of smaller factors eventually make it clear that, okay, this is probably taking place in a different universe. It may be one that's only slightly to the left of ours, but it's still a different universe nonetheless. A lot of the records that I thought of were more like that than full-on sci-fi. For example, the initial album that came to mind for me with this topic as a whole was Ruby Vroom by Soul Coughing.
Your Cadillac breathes 400 horses over blue lines. You are going to Reseda to make love to a model from Ohio whose real name you don't know.
It's one that has very clear connections to our world, with mentions of Paramount Studios, Al Roker, and the Chrysler Building. But I always envisioned it taking place in a more dystopian spin on that America. The same way that dystopian sci-fi often has a mix of futuristic and vintage technology, Soul Coughing would have songs that take old-timey jazz bass and piano playing, or even direct samples that hold horns, orchestras, or vocals, and pair them with these eccentric guitar and drum patterns that are more unchained to a specific era. That's all in the same place, albeit very clearly defined and kept separate within the mix. It's a bizarre pair of styles that often also has weird pet sounds sprinkled throughout. Like in the track Sugar-Free Jazz, there are all these short pieces of instrumentation that weave in and out of the background. This stuff is often heard just once and never again, rather than a consistent anchor to the song. It's like you're walking through town at night, and these all just happen to be what you hear as you go by. Adding to that image is Mike Doty's beat poetry-esque vocals with an often ominous and intimidating message that, when paired with the slight fuzz of a lot of their samples, feels like you're listening to him from loudspeakers in the street, like he's a narrator not just to us, but to everyone in the city. Neutral Milk Hotel is another band that has clear references to our own history, most commonly to Anne Frank in World War II, and yet manages to, as a whole, feel completely removed from it. In my head, the world of the album is something like Over the Garden Walls, which is overall technologically further back than the 1930s, but there's enough folklore and mystery to the world that it still holds endless possibilities, beyond what we're aware our civilizations had accomplished at that point. Jeff Mangum's lyrics are surreal, his simple guitar strumming and the not at all squeaky clean production is removed from the label of any scene or style from any decade. The points where a full band shows up only holds contradictions in the multiple styles it produces. The horns that blast a few times may call to the old big band genre, but then on Holland 1945 it's closer to a common garage rock setup. And who the hell knows what to make of the times they use the accordion, bagpipes, the singing saw, the zanzithophone, and I'd have to imagine whatever other toys I had laying around. From that stuff alone, it's like, is there anybody else on this planet using all of that on a single record and making it work? It's insane. But even with that being the case, the single aspect that sells Neutral Milk Hotel the most as something truly unique is Jeff Mangum's work as a frontman. He sounds like an old wandering bard who leaves each town once all the people there have heard enough of his tales to finally decide he's crazy. He always stretches his voice just a bit in the wrong direction, but still with sincerity, some level of intimacy, and most of all, with total confidence. He projects just as much force and volume when it's just him and a guitar as he does when he has a full band backing him. It's a voice that can make you believe everything they say. So thank God he's talking about ghosts, carrot kings, and the boy with several heads, and isn't going on about why Good Will Hunting is a great film. I just don't get it! Oh, it's not good! Vocalists like that are a far cry from what's traditionally considered a nice voice or high quality singing. Like, it's not the style that Steve Singer teaches you to do in music school, you know? But voices like that take the stage that was set up by the lyrics and instrumentals and enhance that feeling of the setting actually being lived in by this band. Take a listen to Frank Black and his work with the Pixies, though particularly on Doolittle. It's an album rife with cold imagery on songs like Wave of Mutilation and Monkey Gone to Heaven, or even directly being based off a surrealist film in the case of Debaser. But what sells all these words the most is Frank Black's manic style of singing that's so uncontrollable and unhinged that it strengthens the uncomfortable mood that his lyrics bring, and maintains them through the tracks that have simpler lines.
Got me moving, slicing up eyeballs,
That's a voice that's compelling, unique, and when paired with instrumentals that hold such varied influences from punk to country to surf rock to Latin, you can't pin down where it all belongs. All you can say is that wherever it comes from isn't a place that you want to hang around in for long. If Frank Black himself has a setting in mind, I'd have to imagine it's something along the lines of a David Lynch film. Prior to Doolittle, the Pixies had actually covered the song Heaven from Eraserhead, which is probably most similar to what I imagine Doolittle's world as. That's the case even at the point where the vocals differ most from the rest of the record. On the penultimate track Silver, which features both Frank Black and Kim Deal singing. It holds that eerie sound with the two of them speaking simultaneously for a majority of the track, to the point that you'll forget it isn't just one being singing there. There's actually a Japanese band that uses that tactic consistently, called My Dead Girlfriend. On their only album, Hades, for the vast majority of the record, a man and a woman are singing the same things at the same time, and with this very breathy, ghost-like tone, backed by these dense rock instrumentals that pair harsh drum and guitar sounds with gentle keyboards. It's one of the styles I have the most trouble describing here. Apparently their genre is called bliss rock, whatever that is. For the band themselves, think of it as desperate shoegazer, I guess. I don't know. But once you get to the point of having to make up new terms to describe the sound, that's another sign that it might be what we're looking for in this. Like Deerhunter's another band where to try and label their brand of strangeness will just send you in circles. Or Sparklehorse, who seem to be in a totally different realm from other singer-songwriters, with a voice that's just so incredibly fragile and sad and in that way kinda disturbing. When the sound can't easily be defined and pinned down within what we're familiar with, it's more of an unknown, and feels like there's more distance between us and it than there is in reality. That aspect of what feels unknown to us also applies in regards to album covers, the one visual aspect to a record. A lot of people probably like to think that covers don't matter and don't have any effect on your listening experience, but I don't think you can completely separate them. I noticed that a lot of albums that came to mind for me had covers only in black and white. Ruby Vroom, Hades, Station to Station. Like, yeah, you're given an image of something from this world, but, So there's this one panel in Hunter x Hunter that basically says you understand less of something when you only have part of the knowledge, rather than when you had none of it. A color is ultimately such a small aspect. Like, I'm aware colorblind people exist and do just fine, but still, when there's a piece to it that you know you should have, but it's not there, then you just feel further and further away from it. You can confidently say you know nothing, and you can confidently say you fully understand something. But when what you're most sure of is the fact that you don't know everything, you lose all of the other confidence and precision, and you have plenty to doubt. It applies to plenty of albums I hadn't mentioned yet, like the black and white meshes so well with the low, bass-heavy, ominous feel of post-punk bands like Joy Division, or the chilling empty space of Massive Attack, or there's the Afghan Whigs' first few post-reunion albums that I always felt had a more mystical, occult vibe compared to the more grounded drama of their initial records. Or there's Spiderland by Slint, which by being an early point of post-rock and math rock, with unconventional structures and dynamics and a generally cold demeanor, it's already got things going for it in terms of making it feel alien, especially to those who were there at its time of release. But in particular, I was always drawn in by the cover, and for a long time I couldn't figure out why, but it's all of that I mentioned earlier. The image is colorless, the area is bare and secluded, it feels like the picture could have been taken anywhere. The members of the band are in a large body of water, an inherently mysterious setting that's so many people's greatest fear. And all that you ultimately see of these guys are their heads. From the cover alone, you can't say with certainty what's beneath that. And I've watched the documentary on Slint. I know in reality that the cover was taken in Quarry Lake in Indiana, and I'm like 95% sure that the guys weren't hiding their alien tentacles beneath the water's surface. But even still, the album cover is always the strongest visual representation of a record, and there's so much to be unsure about here. Even down to the album's title, Spiderland. Like, who knows what that is, but we all hope that isn't a place on Earth. With albums, be it through covers like that or through lyrics, we generally only get a piece of the picture, whereas films and books are more easily able to use proper world building to fully illustrate a world. They're just more direct mediums. But weirdly, in a lot of these cases, with the information being so limited, and perhaps even the vast majority of it being left to your imagination, that just makes the effect stronger. Like, with several of these artists, that mystery aspect even applies to them outside of their music. I sure as hell can't find much written about My Dead Girlfriend, at least in English. Several of Slint's members remained quiet in the music scene after dropping an amazing record. Even when their drummer, Britt Walford, played on a notable album soon after, he was only credited under a pseudonym. Or in the case of Jeff Mangum, fully retreating from the music scene for over 10 years after dropping in the Aeroplane and Over the Sea.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
Wow.
Jeff Mangum.
Came from another planet? I guess.
No single one of those aspects is enough to make a band fit into this admittedly arbitrary category. Like, if unearthly lyrics were enough, then a lot more heavy metal bands would have been here. But these pieces all richly enhance the effect when the actual music, the vocals, the instrumentals, or the strange collage of styles is already producing something that feels so foreign to the types of sounds we generally consume, or are at least aware of. These are bands that play strangely as if it were normal, as if we can all see the picture in their head as clearly as they can, and that leads to them truly occupying their own space. Like, Bowie overlaps with way too many eras and styles to categorize easily. As much as the Pixies influenced a lot of the 90s alt-rock and have connections to other notable bands in the 80s underground scene, they don't neatly slot into either side. While Neutral Milk Hotel clearly influenced notable acts like the Decemberists, when those guys play, it feels like they're acting out a play, which is purposeful and delightful, sure, but with Neutral Milk Hotel, it sounds inexplicably real. It's a bit of familiarity, but mixed with so much unknown. That's why the mystery works. Bands and artists like that, whether well known or not, are something special. It's why I always have and always will seek out new music. There'll be rare finds, but no matter how much you know, there will never be a point where you've found every surprise out there. Lately, my biggest step has been listening to more and more music from all around the world in languages other than English, because in the grand scheme of things, that English language bubble is small. And ultimately, the whole world's still pretty small too, so just the same as hearing music from all around the planet, I'd like to hear music from all around the universe. And albums like these might be the closest I get.
I can't seem to see the solid light.